Okay, so um, I guess writing is the way to do this, but I'm trying to do this talking. So there's a major world factors that play a very significant role on the development of a child's psychology. Any human child. And these are global factors. So I've already said once that as a human network, the least amount of information you know about your fellow human species, uh, to summarize, it makes you more vulnerable. But that's too simplified for a parent raising the child in that environment. So we've got to figure out a language that conveys the depth of depravity and the severity of catastrophe. See, this is another thing too, is vulnerable. Hmm. People, now this is the problem here. The modern day parent, because they're in survival mode or survival instinct, because they're raised in the same depraved, horrific conditions, human conditions, they look at things of economic conditions, social conditions, and so vulnerable already means that your child is suffering immense agony because the state of a human child up until recently has, for the most part of human experience, been one of security. The what you see in the human effect is just there were wars and conflicts and stuff like that. But with the rise of Rome and the implementation of Abrahamic ideological core principles, the scale of human degradation and the systematic precision put into understanding exactly the process to deconstruct the legacy of the human child experience um, has very, maybe not origins, but it definitely stands as a significant portion in the legacy. So here's what it is. When it comes down to kind of along these lines, um, the modern day child or descendant, because they can't place, anyways, the modern day child of the descendant of the raped Indian woman. Okay, so Mathematically speaking, that's every Filipino, Puerto Rican, Cuban, except for the black ones. Um, uh, Chilean, Argentinian. There's a divide. So in South America, they know who they are because they're fighting for against the Indians as well. But and then in America, you have it happens with white people too. It's just not as easy to see. Um, so genetically speaking, the Spaniards massacred the male DNA so as to inject their DNA. Again, this creates a somehow they mastered, and it is a fact demonstrated by the current conditions of the world that you can impose a type of code into DNA that has the capacity to, unbeknownst to future generations, supplant what would otherwise be called neurotic impulses, but under the conditions of prevalence and the pervasive nature of it being so repetitious that it's actually monotonous. That's where it gets the perception of normal. Um, so the okay. Now this is the way that the Roman Empire works. The Bible is a manual for, so is the Quran. Um, it is Abraham, because Abraham is a Roman construct. So the Bible is a Roman imperial construct on the um, conquest and subjugation of what would otherwise be considered indigenous people, or in modern day terms, fifth, fourth, and third world. Third world today is considered dirt poor, but third world yesterday are like the Sioux that lived in teepees, or the Hopi, I think, that might have lived in the mountain, carved out of the mountains, or yes, India is third world. I guess China might even be second world. But the use of the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it goes to the fifth world. You only hear about third world because there's a reason. They want you to think that as it gets further away from first, it gets worse. See how this works? But the fifth world is actually the core of all of humanity. It is the non-dwelling kind of resident. Yes, there's a more tribal. No, I guess. No, actually, I guess the Sioux are fifth world. I take that back. The Sioux are fifth world. Third world. India's third world, I guess. And third world doesn't mean poor. It just means that you're less reliant on um, industrial kind of stuff, mechanized. That's not to say you don't use tools, obviously, or weapons, but or that you don't know how to manufacture them. It's that your brain has no concern of trying to escape the task at hand by creating something to do the task at hand. So that's a, in one sense, that's a source, that's a type of contentment that is targeted, and that is part of what the fifth world is. Fifth world, in sum, this is what I consider my breakthrough. The fifth world, in sum, is the world in which the human child dreams exist. It is, and this is actually, in one sense, a Freudian slip recognized by the forces at hand, who are the architects of the fifth world genocide and conquest, extermination, which I'm sure that they would call a holocaust, or holy cause, or hallowed cause, or also translated into Greek as burnt offering to the gods. So they're burning down the fifth world. And it's a lot more resilient than technologically anticipated. But the fifth world, and there's the reason of that, this is the hardest thing to get, is because the fifth world's connection to the child's dream state and real, what most people believe is the sinful nature of man as the core, that's like a hair, to use your own analogies. That's like a mere hair on a human, not even their head, some part of their body. The sinful nature is in no way, shape, or form a foundational element. It's just a visible, not even all the time visible, characteristic demonstrated by behavior, essentially. So, but what a baby dreams, see, this is how I know the truth. What a baby dreams is what a human being foundational core is. The stomach in the stomach, actually, because it's what this is the reason why fifth world doesn't necessarily focus on the heart. You have stuff like the liver and the stomach, okay? Because like the Hindu Vedics trying to convey the concept of the human body in and of itself is a fire, is an altar, an eternal, is a organic fire burning sacraments unto this existence. And the more attentive, in one sense, at the same time, the less restricted you are to what you do to your body, you can produce either low and dark, like a sad, depressed state of hunger, really, which is expressed in all of the characteristics of hunger, and this is politicians and military people and clergy who are hungry for people to follow them and to obey them. Okay, they're hollow. They have no holocaust in them, a holy burning fire unto the gods. They don't have that. So they have to go create it out externally by taking a lot of people's lives. An alarm, taking other people's lives. It is why you have at the same time too, the rise of genetically modified. In the context, none of this makes sense. What's going on in the world, none of it makes sense in a practical way. Uh, well, it can't make sense either way. A good example, and I draw from life, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm an asshole. But so in this issue, trying to reconcile this issue with my apartment, um, it turns out that the owners of the apartment, and the apartment again is in a basically dilapidated state. This unit doesn't have heat, which is a crime. Okay? Or the only people that can make the distinction between the scale of the crime are criminals, because they're considering the consequences that they would face personally, as opposed to the consequences due such behavioral flaws or such malicious behavior. But so the comes to the thing that while this, I'm first engaging the landlord, um, who's coming off aggressive, which is fine. Okay, the landlord's belief is that the protection of their property is a protection of their being. And that's part of this Abrahamic notion of property. It's very important here. Here's a big thing to understand too. The way that this Fifth World genocidal campaign has developed, it's a constantly ongoing thing. So it has very many different characteristics. From the invention of private property as so to exterminate hunting grounds and then park reserves. See, people, the positive elements of your society are grossly disgusting, vain, malicious attempts to murder a portion of the very child that you not only were, but hope to probably one day raise, or if not hope to raise, whether you like it or not, participated in the production of. So the manufacturing, because private property is a very new concept that goes not that far back. But you can see this. It's a some kind of change of the feudal type systems in which there was a private property held by only land grants of the imperial force, and everybody else was a tenant society. So what the private property is, like going solar in California, is, from the standpoint and everything that I think, is solar the best solution, the only solution that we have? No, it's not the only solution that we have. Under the practical terms and conditions that we're facing, is it the best possible solution that humanity can probably come to grips with? Yeah, and it's been difficult just to come to grips with it, and it goes with the landlord too. They asked me what I did, and I told them I set appointment for solar. And the first thing out of the lady's mouth, which was interesting, was, "Oh, they want people to get it. Why do they make it so expensive?" Okay, so here's a lady and her husband who are living off of the depravity and the poverty in which they spread into communities other than their own, because they're Jewish. And then at the same time, viciously and committedly, determinedly, resolutely sit there and think of this thing solar, and as a defensive mechanism, immediate, I have to spend money on it. And so, what private property does is it creates the notion where that woman, who otherwise, absent from the influence literally of the man and the money, would have more concern for a human child in general than a dilapidated structure or some kind of contractual stipulations, um, so as to cover your ass. Um, but like with the solar, there is no capacity to consider the actual the the scope of the whole thing. So there's only the I have to spend money on it. Oh, that's seen as a threat to your private property because you have nothing, you are nothing, you're hollow, you have no holocaust inside of you, so you have to create it outside. And this is the acquisition of money. I guess that's where I'm going. And again, it's important to point out that the Holocaust, the term the Holocaust, as far as its reference to the events of the World War II and the killing of 6 million Jews underneath the 27 million Russians that died, the term Holocaust was not applied. The Jews did not do a democratic process once they started slaughtering in Israel and everything. They didn't do the council and do a vote on, oh, let's call it the Holocaust. Let's use a Greek word that references a burnt offering to polytheist gods, so as to sanctify the development of a new undertaking, like the way Abraham did with Isaac. No, the Jews didn't actually do that. The winners, the Americans, who funded Hitler, the UK, who allied with Hitler against Russia, and then when he started to lose because of the winter, betrayed him, because the king and Hitler were basically related in one real sense. Germany, the royal families of Germany and England were by double marriage and cousins, 2 generations back to back, two marriages back to back. Those people came up with the term Holocaust. Those are also the people, as pointed out by, I forgot his name already because his book isn't out here, but he wrote the book Dawn. Those people are also the people that, as pointed out at the very first opening of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial, that it was the Allied forces who never, after everything they bombed city after city. And my grandfather was one of the bombers. He was a B-17 bomber, and he flew over 100 missions, which normally would only do 27 or 17 or something like that, because he would sit in for other people. I think it was 117. So they bombed cities and cities, but they never bombed the railway lines that took the Jews to the concentration camps. So that to me is a very complex thing, because the Jews are no longer seen as fifth world members. But there are deep cultural elements of them that have proven to be irreversible, while massive amount of pressure is created, private property, wealth, and justified paranoia creates an environment in which those are suppressed with the maximum consistency and intensity. Okay, last point. In this fifth world conquest, there are sacred elements that are recognized that cannot be erased from the DNA. The same way, okay, this is the catch. The same way they do the rape to instill the DNA is because they know there's something in the DNA. There's information in the DNA. That's the point. The positive has the negative parallel. So when they're trying to write the DNA with rape, what they're facing, what they didn't take into account, because they were too chauvinistic, was that the mother's DNA is the core. They think the father's blood, and they think, because they actually do believe that shit. But in one sense, you have to know that's not true in order to create that lie. And the whole system of rape that makes that make any sense, okay? So they had to create the whole fatherhood bloodline story, not in premonition of the rape campaign to come. That's the hard part to get. The story of Babel, without people knowing it, is the story of the subjugation and the constant, like what happened to the Philippines, which most Filipinos don't know, or what happened to China under Japan, or the Philippines under China. There we go. Instead of the Philippines under America, because most Philippines can't face the fact that what Americans did was probably 1,000 times worse than what the Chinese did to them. But who's your daddy? Oh, see how it works though? That's kind of fucked up. That was on the fly, but the message is in the DNA. So the information is in the DNA, and that's what they don't want you to know. And they keep you from being able to activate it, which in Hinduism or the Vedics was the sun-like luster of a person. Because the more information you activate, the more things you know about your fellow humans and the world today, the more things you know about your DNA, your genetic code, the more you activate the information, the more you glow with the sun and the sun-like luster. In Buddhism, they give you the analogy what that means. The sun and the moon. The Buddha is the sun. The moon is the law. The light of the Buddha, the behavior, the characteristics, the engagement of the Buddha shines and allows the moon, the law, to be seen while it's always there. So that's it. Come to grips with the Illuminati thing is a mythology designed to conceal the ongoing genocidal mass global genocide of all things fifth world humanity. And I would say, yes, make sure that you understand that the fifth world is the core, because the fifth world is the closest human society to the child and the child's dreams. And if the fifth world is gone, that element of the child's dream will be gone. And then if you thought your life was miserable as a child now, imagine the children of the future that won't even have Indians or wild people to dream about.